I want to begin today by remembering the people of Palestine. From the river to the sea, communities are struggling to hold on to their land, access to water sources, their homes, and their right to live with dignity in the face of relentless occupation and violence. Their fight is not just for survival, but for the recognition that land and water are more than commodities. They are the basis of life, culture, and freedom. This solidarity across struggles reminds us that the issues we will be talking about today of displacement, of ecological destruction, of livelihoods under threat are not isolated. In particular, our focus today will be the eastern shoreline, and in India, we have witnessed a rapid surge of industrial projects, that is, thermal and nuclear power plants, ports, aquaculture industries, and now pump storage projects, all of which have placed tremendous pressure on fragile coastal ecosystems. Combined with this, climate change driven sea level rise, cyclones, and erosion, these developments have compounded the precariousness of coastal communities. However, we see that these voices, their struggles, their resilience, and deep ecological knowledge rarely find space in English, language, law, and policy debates. That is why today's discussion is important to sort of bring those experiences into sharper focus and to think about how law, policy, and governance might respond more meaningfully to the lived realities of the coast. We're fortunate to have with us two speakers who bring dedicated commitment and insight to this issue. They are Gutta Rohith and Dr. K. Sudha. Gutta Rohith is a practicing advocate at the Andhra Pradesh High Court and a member of the Human Rights Forum. His work spans from public interest litigation, human rights advocacy, and grassroots engagement with fisherfolk, tribal communities, and displaced populations. He's been at the forefront of legal interventions and campaigns challenging the destructive impacts of unchecked industrialization along Andhra's coast. Now, about Dr. K. Sudha. Sudha ma'am has also been my professor at law school. She is a human rights activist with the Human Rights Forum and an assistant professor at DSNLU Visakhapatnam. Over the years, she has been committedly engaged with documenting rights violations in Andhra Pradesh and across the country, including fact-finding missions on displacement, environmental degradation, and women's rights. Her work also sort of situates how questions of livelihood and ecology intersect with the constitutional guarantees and human dignity. With their experience on ground and in the courts, both our speakers embody the critical bridge between lived struggles and the language of law. With that, I will request Rohith to begin the session, and the floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you, Anjana. First of all, I'd like to thank JGU and
Rohith, your camera has to be switched on. Yeah.
sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Anjana. First, I'd like to thank JGU and the department as well as Anjana for organizing this and inviting us. That I'll just start with a very basic thing. Now, disclaimer here is like I would limit myself to the coast of Andhra because, well, we have a generic knowledge of other coasts. This is our work area, so you can have a bit more understanding about this coast of Andhra, which is also the second longest coastline, I believe, in India. So with that, what I'd like to say is that the very fundamental thing is even according to Indian laws, the fisher folk as a community hasn't been distinctively recognized. after 75, not 75 years, I think 60 years or something, the Indian laws have but distinctively recognized Adivasis. Of course, with the great thing that saying that we are correcting the historical injustice, they have enacted FRA to give rights over their own lands to them or their own resources. Basically, giving the resources rightfully to the people who would belong to that. So FRA is just recognition of the rights which are already existing. It doesn't grant any new rights. It recognizes the rights which are already in existence, customarily or historically. Whereas such thing, if you look in other way, if you look at that in a way, Adivasis and fisher folk are similar in quite a few ways. Traditionally away from the, what do you say, quote unquote mainland or mainstream Hindu society, a distinct away with their own culture and with their own livelihoods and whatever. Whereas Adivasis were recognized, fisher folk haven't been recognized today, and that particular thing is wreaking havoc on their lives as of today. Because for Adivasis, as we know, the exploitation started with the British colonial rule and continued. Whereas, particularly with respect to fisher folk and coast, it kind of started post 90s after the LPG. So there is not much of an any legislation even to that. Immediately after 1991, we have this coastal regulatory zone. 91 to 2025, 34 years, it still remains a subordinate legislation. It's not made into an act. It is still a notification, which can be amended as they like, and which they did over the past 34 years. I think I have lost the count of number of times they have uh, amended this notification, perhaps 100 or 120 times, and they have replaced it in once in 2011, recently in 2019, which was completely watered down on many occasions. There is no legislation on the lines of FRA. Where FRA recognizes the rights of the forests and the resources for the forest-dependent communities, who are mostly Adivasis, whereas here mostly it's the fisher folk and non-fisher folk peasant castes. There are no rights that have been devolved to them. Even if you look at the CRZ, there's nothing of that kind for them. No right for them, no right of the resources, nothing, be it the landward resources or seaward resources. And that is kind of wreaking havoc on these communities. Like, for example, if you look at Andhra, in a way, it's very symbolic that the northern tip of Andhra starts with a nuclear power plant and it extends all the way to a complex of thermal power plants on the southern tip, the entire coast, starting from nuclear power plant in Srikakulam, all the way to a complex of power plants in Nellore. From downwards of Nellore, we'll have this Tamil Nadu. And in between, punctuated by ports. There are quite a few ports. I think if you actually look at the proposals or already ports under construction or which are planned, 1000 by 17 would be how much? 50, 60, 70. For every 70 kilometers, there is a port. For every 70 kilometers. And every time a port is notified, the port limits have to be notified. Whenever a port is planned, port limit. So generally, if you look at the limits of any notified port, be it a major port or a minor port, more or less, if the government wants, they can take away entire 972 kilometers under the port limits. Because as we said, almost for every 70, 80 kilometers, there is a port now. A substantial portion of 972 kilometers, government can notify as a port, for which CRZ will not apply. For which CRZ, so whatever is left of CRZ also will not apply if the government wants it. Because of the port every 70 kilometers, and we don't know what is happening with all these ports. And particularly Andhra Pradesh is not heavily industrialized state as well. It is still commercial agriculture state with industries here and there. And even if undivided state, it's mostly it's a service sector which runs Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. It's not the manufacturing sector like any part of the India. Manufacturing sector isn't much. It's a mostly service sector. Then in that case, there's no rationale. Why do we need so many ports? If that is one thing. Second thing is about if the industrialization, whatever is left after the center industrialization and take over lands, tourism. That has started in the last, say, 10, 15 years. And in fact, we can say that there's a lot of opposition to actually tourism projects and industrial projects, if we have to say here. Because industrial projects at least promise some jobs, whether they give or not is secondary. I'll come to that with a few examples. Tourism, absolutely, there are no even jobs to provide, except for housekeeping jobs, which being, and as we know, fisher folk community, even speaking, they are very close knit and they're very close knit communities. They don't appreciate, just throwing some housekeeping jobs at them. And fiercely independent and very close knit communities they are. They don't appreciate being asked to settle for housekeeping jobs, and which they consider very degrading also. That is one thing, tourism. Then other thing, and also the other thing you have to remember is now all this without even factoring in the climate change. Now, if you actually look here, if I look, I don't know if there's a point of land subsidence anywhere in any coast on any coast in India, but it's particularly present in Andhra Pradesh because of the oil and gas drilling in the Godavari KG basin, which is called Krishna Godavari basin. Land subsidence where huge swathes of land are going underwater actually, under the sea level. I'm not under the water, sorry. They're going under the sea level. So basically, on a substantial portion of land, sea is above the land. And anyhow, we know the shoreline receding and all that, which has been a bit common. But even the shoreline receding, there are variations of many villages completely disappearing over a period of 1 or 2 years. While on one hand, they have the land subsidence, on the other hand, they have shoreline receding. And all this, they being the frontline victims of climate change, sea warming, which because of which the catch has been dwindling. Like put it in numbers, if you compare between 2000, let us take last decade, 2014 to 2025, the catch marine landings in Andhra Pradesh have fell down by almost half. That is why the phenomena which we can see on Andhra Pradesh coast is many of the fisher folk are turning to be farmers. Because farming is a bit more remunerative, because the coastal lands being the sandy soils, commercial agriculture is very viable there, particularly a coconut, casuarina, cashew nut, mango, which are not traditional crops which are dependent on the government or which are dependent on government support. These are commercial crops where there will be demand always in domestic demand as well as exports, and they're turning to agriculture. If you look today, the income, if you take the income of a fisher folk today on Andhra Pradesh coast, I think the income from farming is more than income from fishing for them. It's because the fishers come down drastically. That is also the reason many of the fisher folk, particularly from North Andhra, go to work on trawlers in Maharashtra and Gujarat. As we know, Maharashtra and Gujarat, they rule the roost in trawling compared to, followed by Tamil Nadu. Compared to Kerala, Andhra, West Bengal, Odisha, these three states mostly are heavy into trawlers. So many of these people either go work on the trawlers or move to agriculture. All this is because sea warming, dwindling catch, and dwindling catch, neither sea warming nor dwindling catch is their problem or their mistake. They are, I think the contribution to all this will be, I think, less than 1 into 10 power minus 10%. But they are the frontline victims of that. And we have nothing, as much as I know. I mean, it could have been, but as much as I have known and gone through, there's nothing for any of this in the entire debates or discussions about the climate change or climate change policy or environmental policy. You won't find a word about any of this. Because the CRJ relate, to begin with, CRJ itself now not an act relate. It's a notification. Any babu sitting in a North Block in Delhi can amend it as per their wish without even bothering to take the consent, let alone consultation. Like the 2019 CRJ was taken without any consultation, which further whittled down whatever was left in 2011 CRJ. There was no consultation whatsoever during the preparation of CRJ 2019, which replaced 2011 CRJ. So that's how it has been on the policy front. And another thing which you'd like to say is like one other thing which has come kind of is acting against them was aquaculture. Like aquaculture in India is mostly an export business because the domestic consumption is quite less. And 80% of the Indian aqua exports are from Andhra Pradesh again. 80%. That's why the recent tariff hit with 60% has completely devastated the aqua farmers. That's already a different thing. 80% of the Indian aqua exports are from Andhra Pradesh, and these are controlled completely by the dominant peasant castes. completely dominated by dominant the four dominant peasant castes in Andhra. They control the entire aquaculture business because of the huge. I think the spread of aquaculture is more. I think is above 1 million acres or 1 million hectares. So it's on such large scale. That is also one reason which completely, aquaculture is always very cheap compared to capture fisheries. Culture fishery is always very cheap because you don't need much investment, you don't need any employment because one person is enough to take care of the whole field. Just 1%, one person. He will provide the feed, he will catch the fish, and he will do everything. It will be he only, she. There's no she in this entire business. He'll take care of everything. And because of that, this entire aquaculture has brought down the price of the fish, marine fish. That is also another reason these people are losing interest or not too much inclined towards fishing anymore. Like as we can say, that's why we can see that the number of fishermen, again it's men, number of fishermen has come down drastically over a period of time. And along with this entire unbridled development and tourism. Like I'll give you one example. Like we all know BPCL, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited. Now, if you have to believe the government, it is setting up the biggest oil refinery on the coast of Andhra, Nellore, which I told about. It's completely fully with. There are already two ports, a complex of thermal power plants, and at the same location, you have this BPCL. Generally, if you say BPCL of that is 9 MMTPA, 9 million metric tons per annum. Generally, 1,000 acres would be sufficient for that. But now they are planning to acquire 6,000 acres. And 6,000 acres, it's mostly coast, which actually is not allowed under CRZ, but we don't know how they want to do it. 6,000 acres, whereas it's 1,000 acres would be sufficient. But they want to take 6,000 acres. Similarly, there's another plant called solar module manufacturing plant. Again, built as the world's largest integrated solar module manufacturing plant. It's from end to end, from polysilicon all the way to the solar modules. Back of the envelope calculation done by us said that 1,000 to 1,500 acres would be sufficient for that. But now they are planning to acquire 8,400 acres for that, which is a major portion of that being the coast, which again goes against CRZ, but again, we don't know how they want to do it. Like just these two will be around 15,000 acres. Just these two in a small district. And multiply it by 7, 3, 6, 8 districts. You can imagine the amount of land grab. No, we are not saying there should be no industries. All these are manufacturing industries. Manufacturing industries can be put up in hinterlands also on a much smaller scale. But it's because it will be the cost of the project and the operational cost of the project will be very less because they can immediately, whatever if they claim to be exporting, it's very easy for them to be closer to port. That's actually the logic. Port-based development. Like the Sagarmala project, if you see, the entire Sagarmala project is all about developing infrastructure and port-based development. This port-based development, just one small district of Andhra Pradesh, if you can say around 20,000 acres are about to be acquired, where there is a lot of opposition. There's a lot of opposition, but just imagine the amount of land. Wherever there is no commercialization or industrialization, there we have tourism. Just resorts. Though it's not, of course, it's though not on the scale of Goa and Kerala, but slowly. Goa and Kerala come outliers when it comes to tourism, this thing, coastal-based tourism. Wherever there is no industrial destruction, we have tourism here. Either they want this, either they want that. Basically, they don't want fisher folk. They don't want fisher folk to be seen anywhere near the coast. Similarly, they don't want Adivasis to be in the forest. They don't want fisher folk to be on the shore. Neither mangroves will come in the way, nor their lives will come in the way. Nothing will come in the way. No, the question is, there's a very sharp question, even from the fisher folk, especially when it comes to how can you call this development where you completely displace us, where we are kind of self-sufficient, despite the fall in catch and despite the non-availability of catch as it was in the past, still we are going is good for us, relatively speaking. Why do you want to displace from us? How will you define this? What is this development? How can we call this even development? More than any of the things which are said till now, this ideology of development is what is the more biggest trouble. Like we go to a collector. The first question the collector will ask us is, why are you against development? We go meet a minister. The first question the minister asks us is, why are you against development? The center ideology, the center rigid ideology of development. That is one thing which, and there's a substantial support to this, especially from the urban folks, urban middle class, upper middle class folks. They are the biggest torchbearers and the torchbearers of this entire developmental ideology. No one till date has answered us the very basic question that why don't you set up a nuclear power plant next to your home? Or why don't you set up a resort next to your home? No one has answered this question till date. They'll just say that it's all just stupid water battery. It's a very fundamental question. Why don't you put up a damn power plant next to your home? Why don't you put up a damn smelter plant, which was shut down after 25 years after a lot of struggle, loss of lives in Thoothukudi? Why don't you put up it next to your house? The urban, particularly urban metro middle class folks, have to think about this. Their ideological predilections and their ideological rigidity is creating a lot of these troubles. Because all said and done, it's the middle class voice that counts a lot. Like we have seen recently ethanol, to give an example, where we have been saying, people have been saying we don't want ethanol plants because ethanol plants are highly polluting and they're absolutely useless. Government did not even respond. The moment when four-wheeler people with their four-wheelers on Twitter and all this started talking about this, government was forced to respond to that. That's the power of the middle class today in this country, which is very unfortunate and which should not be the case in any functioning democracy. But yeah, but at the end of the day, the entire responsibility falls as much as on the urban middle class sections as well as much as on the government. More than all the material aspects which we have talked about, being the lack of any act or being lack of anything, there are no rights for them, anything. This is the developmental ideology that is the biggest, what you can say, trouble or whatever for these folks. They're happy to be, just let them be. Very simple. They're very just happy to be, let them be. As you discussed, anyone, people who have known Fisher Folk community would have known that they're fiercely independent and very close-knit communities they are. They're just very happy to be, let them be. But just that we don't want them to let them be. That's the biggest problem that we have today. And yeah, I think I'll end with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rohit. I have made so many points, and yeah, I think especially about the shift from fishing to farming, the flawed idea of not flawed, the like you said, the rigid ideology of development. These are some of the questions that should be troubling all of us when we think about marginalized communities, especially fishing communities, as we are talking about them. With that in mind, we have got some questions from Professor Siddharth Bhaskar, which we will take at the end of the session. I will now hand over the floor to Dr. Sudha, and may I please request you to switch on your video and yeah, proceed. Yeah.
Thank you, Anjana, and thank you, for inviting me for this meeting. I'd like to start where actually Rohit started. He tried to compare the backwardness and the social disability which Adivasi communities face. And spoke about that at least they have an FRA to fall back on, whereas the fisher folk do not have anything, any protection, which law doesn't provide any kind of a protection for the fisher folk. This reminds of incident which happened here in Visakhapatnam a couple of years ago. The fisher folk of Visakhapatnam and Srikakulam district, in the state of AP, they came and they started agitating and demanding for that we should be given the status of scheduled tribes because we have the similar kind of a social disability. We depend as much on nature as the Adivasis depend on forest. And what happened is that in Srikakulam, they had they arranged one dharna and they were sitting there and sit-in was there and they went on a hunger strike. sadly, what happened is that the Adivasis from the agency area, in the North Andhra part, what we have is that the fifth schedule area and the coastal districts. It's very close to the coast. Though coastal area is not covered under the fifth schedule area of the constitution, but that one night, all of a sudden, Adivasis came and they came and they attacked the fisher folk and burned the whole tent wherever they were sitting and protesting. So this was a very unfortunate incident where two communities which face a similar kind of a backwardness and a similar kind of disability, and both and the proximity to nature is also something which really we can draw some parallels with in this particular aspect. They were at loggerheads. Now, whether the fisher communities can be given can be categorized as scheduled tribes or not, I think that is beyond the pale of this particular meeting or beyond the scope of this particular meeting. I don't want even to go into that, venture into that aspect. But the whole incident, when it took place, the district administration took the help of people belonging to both the communities and also some human rights organizations like us. And we tried to see that our human rights activists tried to see that somehow things will fall back in place. But the question remains as it is. As Rohith has rightly pointed out, uh, since the pre-independence period, the Adivasis, they had got their rights recognized, whether it is through the Government of India Act 1935 or the Constitution itself has provided certain kind of, has recognized the right by inserting the fifth and sixth schedule. And again in 1990s when we had the PESA Act came, and then later FRA Act came in 2006. That kind of protection is lacking when it comes to the coastal communities. Well, if you compare their disability with Adivasis, this is where they stand. Whether you take the case of constitution doesn't have a specific provision for the coastal communities as such. For that matter, if you look at the coast, about the coast, where does it fall back on? Even if you look into the seventh schedule, the entire no particular entry or list actually addresses the issue of covers all the subjects which have to be dealt under the coast. So that is one thing that becomes. And the other thing is that after that, were there any laws which were passed to protect the rights of the coastal community? What we find is that there is no positive law. Now, as Rohith had mentioned about CRZ norms, as well as if you get a few aspects, if you look into the policy, if policies which have been taken up, even if you talk about the national policy, National Fisheries Policy 2020, they do a mention about coastal communities, but even if the CRZ norms are speaking about it only speaks about the protection of the rights of the coastal communities in an indirect manner. It what has actually, if you look at the 99 from 1991 to 2019 CRZ norms, what have they done for the coastal communities? Have they protected the interests there? Have they spoken of their livelihood or tried to look at about their housing rights? Have they really tried to protect them? From 1991 to 2019, as Rohith had rightly pointed out, there are more than 40 amendments which have been introduced either to the 1991 notification or 2011 notification or the 2019 notification. But none of them actually has a positive statement to make about the coastal communities, and none of them actually speaks about how we are going to protect the coastal communities. They only talk about creating of zones and how in each particular zone, what are the do's and don'ts, where is the development supposed to be carried out, where are we supposed to stop, and they have a different yardstick for each particular zone, CRZ1, CRZ2, 3, 4. But now they have divided that zone to simply say that you are not supposed to do this here, you are not supposed to do this here, you can do this here, you cannot do this here. That is all that they speak of. But they don't earmark a particular place that where are the coastal communities supposed to live and where are they supposed to go and try to curb their livelihood. And in case they will be displaced, where are they supposed to be relocated? That kind of a thing is completely absent in the CRZ notifications. And when we look into this issue, uh, is it CRZ the only law which really speaks about the coastal communities, or are there any other laws which address these issues? There are several other laws that we have to speak about, which actually regulate the lives of the coastal community of the fisher folk. For instance, if you not only CRZ notifications, but every state is coming up with marine fisheries regulation. The enactments are there, which are passed by each state. Some have AP has come up with an enactment in 1992. They have also drafted it. And each particular state comes up with its own norms relating to how are we going to issue licenses to the fishing vessels. And this is again, if you look at the MFRA legislations, they are mostly, what are they trying to do? They're regulating the fisheries or the commercial activity of fishing, and how the fishing vessels have to get a license and try to regulate it, prohibit certain kind of activities. So it is more to do with what regulating the lives of the fisher coastal communities as well as trawlers. So mechanized boats, for what, where are they supposed to indulge in fishing, and where are the artisan or the traditional fisher folks supposed to do? They have tried to earmark a particular place and said beyond 8 nautical miles, the mechanized boats can enter into. So that kind of a division they have made and said that within this particular limit, what are the ways and means in which you catch the fish? Because we are particular about not only the ends, but also the means how you catch the fish, because it is a detriment to the environment and also to the ecosystem, and also for the conservation of the living resources, marine resources. The method that we adopt is very important. So in this aspect, the MFRA Act and also the legislation go a little bit, try to regulate the lives of the fisher folk, but then they also don't have a positive or affirmative action, which speaks about how are you going to provide them any kind of ways and means in which you are going to support them. Yes, I don't say that there aren't any schemes or policies which really take care of the fisher folk, but in terms of law or the statute, what we find is that there's much to do with that particular area. Then coming to the to take further what Rohith has tried to explain. If you speak about the kind of projects which are coming up in the state of AP, I would also like to fall back on the state of AP's experience, because that is where our organization as well as we have been working on. For instance, the first issue which really which strikes to my mind would be the Gangavaram port, which is very close to where I live, and that is in Visakhapatnam. Gangavaram port is a private port. We already have a port in Visakhapatnam. The Visakhapatnam port is there. When we speak about the port, though we have the Visakhapatnam port, just adjacent to it, another private port had been established, another private port. Now, creating that particular port, for that they had to acquire land. And when they acquired the land, where would they acquire the land from? Obviously, who lives by the sea? It is the coastal communities. So those people who live by the coast, if they are living by right across the seashore, what happens is that they don't have any entitlements for the land on that particular land. So it is very easy to displace them. If they have pattas in their name, there won't be a problem. But if they don't have patta in their name, then what is the consequence? They can easily be displaced. So what they did is that, I'm taking the instance of Gangawar report. What they did is that they displaced the people in that particular village, the coastal community, the fisher folk, and they gave lands them in the near Kajbak, which is
Hi, Anjana, is it working?
No. I think it's stuck. So yeah, I will try and reach ma'am. Just see if looks like the internet there is stuck. Yeah. Just a minute.
am I visible? Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, we are having a thunderstorm here. So I hope, sorry for the interruption. Now, coming to this issue, as I had said, I only wanted to mention this because when you speak about the tenurial rights, where if you're talking about, first of all, when you come up with a law, you don't recognize the rights. That is one thing. Then when you enact a law, or when you bring up a particular delegated legislation, CRZ notification is nothing but a subordinate legislation. When you bring up that subordinate legislation, in the whole making of the law, the traditional knowledge of the fisher folk is not taken into consideration. That is one fundamental flaw in the kind of initiatives that we are taking in the name of protection of the coastal areas. Now, so when you make the law, though you don't take their inputs, one thing. Second thing is that when you don't have those inputs, obviously, what is the consequences that these communities are going to face is not reflected in the law. And finally, when you enforce the law, even in those committees, you fill them up with bureaucrats, nothing, all the CZMA, for instance, the Coastal Zone Management Authority, or the State Environment Impact Assessment Authority. Just one second. I'll get that as a answer. Am I visible?
Yeah, you can speak. Yeah. I think
Am I visible now?
yeah, you can, you are.
So sorry for this disturbance.
No, that's okay. That's completely okay.
Yeah. So when we don't take the inputs when we make the law, neither do we include them when we enforce, either make them or provide them any substantive relief. Or the third thing is that when it comes to the administrative part, we make them mere spectators. See, even if you look at the BEIA regulations or the CRZ norms, obviously there is one sincere effort, and that is public consultation and scope is there. And people can air their views, go and attend the public hearings, and express their views and the concerns if any project comes up. But when we speak about the administrative agencies, they have experts in that particular panel or that particular committees. They have bureaucrats, and only non-officials. There are very few, and even those few non-officials who are there, they are not picked up from the coastal communities. At least there should be some kind of a representation. That is something missing in those committees. That is one thing that I raise in this particular. Then the other thing is that when we talk about the the judicial response, coming to the administrative and how we are enforcing the CRZ norms, what we find is that there are so many projects lined up in the state of AP. Actually, Rohit has a very rich experience. He comes up with a lot of what he's been doing a lot of groundwork on these issues these days, and he has worked on several. Speak about it, whether it is power plants or whether it is tourism in the name of what is happening in the West Godavari district or in Nellore. He has gone and tried to he has a lot of hands-on experience, which actually came across this. What we find is that there are power plants, there are ports. Why do we need a port for every 70 kilometers? Does it really make sense? Do we have so much of trade going on, our import and export? Do we really require so much of so many ports? Is one thing that we have to look at. The second thing is that we have to reconsider is that if the whole Sagarmala project or the Bharatmala project. The other thing is that there is another 6-lane. Is it 6-lane or 8-lane, Rohit? I'm not sure. Which is coming from the West Bengal. It will come to the tip till Tamil Nadu, and then it will reach Gujarat. So 8-lane. Yeah, that is along the coast. Do we really require that? Is it something which is quintessential? And at the same time, we say that we shouldn't be taxing nature so much. And we talk about the sea level rise. We talk about beach erosion. And in the name of beach erosion, and at the same time, we want all this happening. Are we really clear about what are really our priorities are? And in all this, who should be given more importance? Is it nature first, then coastal community, then livelihoods, and then commercial activity? How are we going to prioritize? I know that definitely tourism it brings in employment, generates employment, but is it really at the cost of the coastal communities giving up their livelihood? Can't we reconcile both of them somewhere or the other? Make the lives of the coastal community interesting for the tourists also. Maybe we can integrate. Can we think in those terms? Or if the coastal communities have to give up some part of their whether their rights over their land and the sea, both land and the sea, they are entitled to their rights not only on the sea but even on the land, because without the land they cannot survive. They'll go and catch the fish, but they have to bring back back to the land, and then they have to sell their product. And not only that, they have to they need housing. So all that is something where it is not only about rights over the sea, or even on the rights over the land. So tenure rights, if you speak about it, it's inclusive of both land and sea. So coming to this aspect, as if we look at it, Gangavaram port, which I was referring to earlier, and after especially Gangavaram port, what happened is that this is a science tells us that the ports, when we establish a port, it is going to inevitably cause beach erosion on the left side. There are studies which indicate. So and what we find is that there is a lot of substantial beach erosion which is happening towards the east part, and so from Visakhapatnam to Bhimunipatnam, what is the Visakhapatnam district, we find a lot of beach erosion happening. And all these villages, which fishing villages, the first thing is that the industries which have come up in and around Visakhapatnam city and the port, that is polluting the waters. That is one problem, because of which we find that the fish are getting contaminated. The second thing is that this beach erosion is entering into their homes. So if you take the Petzalaripata and other settlements or their habitat, in Visakhapatnam, they are losing their homes. So this is one major problem that we come across. As Rohit was rightly pointing out, of land subsidies, which is different, where the land is actually because of oil exploration, which is happening due to ONGC and other oil exploration in Godavari districts. They are trying to find a causal link between that and the oil exploration which is happening. And scientists are trying to say that there is a direct, it is correlated. The subsidence which is happening, land subsidence and oil exploration issue are correlated. And the other thing is that, okay, this is something which happened indirectly. They never expected, ONGC didn't expect that it will lead to the land subsidence. But what about trying to build a power plant on where there is a mangrove, big mangrove reserve, the wildlife sanctuary, Moringa Wildlife Sanctuary near Kakinada city, which is the second largest mangrove area forest after Sundarbans. And this is again something which is very, very important, and it is one of the critical the areas where the coastal areas which have been identified, the Koringa forest, and there you want to establish a power plant, and that led to what they cut down the mangroves, and we have, unfortunately, we have one person who's a very conscientious former civil servant, ES Segma. I wish every state has such kind of a public servant, former public servant who would really be. He's very active, and we are really fortunate to have him. So what he did is that he filed a public interest litigation, NGT, and he got a very favorable order. And the NGT, they came with a team, and they carried out the inspection, and said that this was something which was atrocious. And they awarded compensation. NGT gave a direction that this has to be they imposed. They said that this has to be whatever damage which has been caused, they have to restore the environment. So again, this whole environment fund which has been created, they have to provide pay that amount there, and that is one thing which happened. And in another thing, at least you find that ONGC didn't have an idea that this is going to happen. Gangavaram port people knew that it will cause beach erosion in Visakhapatnam. But whenever this happens, no, they'll come and act as if they're surprised. How come there is beach erosion happening in Visakhapatnam? As if they don't know. So that is one. Then strangely, in Godavari district, what they did is that they wanted, the government wanted to start have a housing colony established on the seashore. So they cut down mangroves, and they said that this is a place for the housing for the poor, Pedalaki Illu. And there for that reason they cut. And so it is not even a development project which we have been referring to. This is a housing project which could have been provided anywhere else. So why do you have to cut down mangroves just to prove a point that you have to provide housing? So this is something which again was taken up before the NGT. And NGT, again, they said, what are you doing? Why are you doing all this? So they again had to intervene, and they again gave a direction to start restoring it. And for that, they imposed some 5 crore rupees fine. Now, what we find is that NGT orders which we come across, there are a few orders which are within its own limitations. What is happening is that NGT has tried to look at various issues which have been raised by many organizations or people, or even people affected or survivors of the environmental projects which are coming up, which are harmful for the environment. So these people are going and moving, whether it is aquaculture, people who are affected because of aquaculture, they have approached High Court and got favorable orders. They have approached NGT, and they are trying to work on these issues. I would, before concluding, I'd like to refer to one particular case which I really fell in love, and that is not from neither from NGT or from our High Court. This is from the what from no, this is the NGT order in Udaya Subarna and others versus Deputy Commissioner, Chairman District Sand Monitoring Committee and others. I would. This is a case where sand mining is something which is again regulated and prohibited, and sand bars are there where on the beach you're not supposed to tinker with the sandbars. So, but what happens is that when it is on the rivers, or if you have to remove the sandbars, just for the sake of what, so that the boats can transport, you facilitate the transportation by the in the waterways in the rivers. What happened is that it is generally the traditional fisher folk who take up that job of removing the sand and replacing it. In that Karnataka, what happened is that this big sand mining lobbies, they went and they started indulging in this whole sand mining. So there is a office memorandum which was passed by the MOEF and the FCC, which says that then a committee has to be constituted. How you're going to take up this whole activity about sand? If you have to remove the sandbar or have to alter it, there should be a committee. And in that committee, they specifically mentioned that the traditional fisher folks' knowledge has to be tapped. So they should their representation should also be there in that committee, in the local committee, and they have to also be a part of it. Now, when when the panchayats took up this particular activity, and when the state government took up this activity of issuing license to the sand for the sand mining, they constituted that committee, but they didn't include the coastal communities, not the fisher folk, traditional fisher. So NGT gave very heavily on those past orders and says that how can you constitute this particular committee without including the coastal communities, because that is there specifically mentioned in the office memorandum prepared by the MOEF. So you have to strictly follow what the MOEF memorandum says. I'm mentioning this to come as a concluding remarks, because obviously when we speak about coast, we talk about the ecosystem. We have to protect the ecosystem, the environment, and that includes the coastal community. And if we miss that point, I think then in that case we have to. It's not only about making the fisher folk a part of the whole exercise of conservation of nature, a part of it. They are as integral to the coastal ecosystem as Adivasis. We say that Adivasis have a symbiotic relation with the forest. In a similar way, what we have to understand is that the traditional fisher folk have a similar kind of a symbiotic relation with the sea. And the sooner we realize, the better. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sudha ma'am and Rohith, for sharing your thoughtful insights. And I'm sure some of these insights for some of us who do not live in coastal cities and who don't understand lived realities, it'll also be an eye-opener, and it'll also sort of make us think about where there is a gap between policy, law, and lived realities. And you've helped us, both of you have helped us see not only the ecological and legal stakes of what's happening along. And like Rohith said, it's not just Andhra, but they're like all over coasts. There are, there's degradation, there is aquaculture, there's setting up of thermal power plants or nuclear power plants or pump storage projects. And what is the definition of development, and the larger question of symbiotic relationship with the sea and the people. And in this, we can see lived struggles and the resilience of communities on the ground. At this point in time, I'd like to open the floor for questions and comments. Please feel free either to raise your hand or to put your thoughts in the chat, and we'll take them one by one. Yeah. Yes, we have 3 questions from Dr. Siddharth Bhaskar. We also have Dr. Ashita, yeah. Please, Ashita.
Yeah, hi. Let's take Siddharth's questions first because he had put them first. So then, yeah.
So, both the speakers can answer these questions. So there are 2 questions by Siddharth. Why is the fish catch falling? Is it because of rise in sea level or the growing pollution in the waters? And the second thing is, a second question is, does tourism create other kinds of jobs like small businesses? Doesn't tourism create other kinds of jobs like small businesses and demand for local goods? Yeah, so these are the 2 questions that have come up from Siddharth. Yeah. Rohit, would you like to go? Or yeah.
So for the first question of Mr. Siddharth, is the fish catch falling? I think from as much as I know, it depends from place to place. There are some places where it's because of the heavy pollution in the sea. Like for example, Sudha ma'am was talking about the center oil drilling and all that. That entire region, the fish catch has come down drastically, particularly because of the oil drilling by ONGC and Reliance. That's major reason. In other places also, it's pollution. Major reasons is pollution and to some extent sea warming.
Okay.
Gotcha. But again, it changes from place to place. For if you actually look at Tamil Nadu, the marine landings, particularly the catch has increased.
Okay.
I mean, that could also be because they venture into Sri Lankan waters regularly. Be different
Which is also
reasons.
a violation. Yeah.
So it depends from place to place. From here, what we could see was it's mostly pollution and offshore activities.
Okay. Yeah. And to the second question,
Anyway,
does it
tourism, what I would like to say, like, there's nothing wrong with tourism per se. Sure, whether there will be demand for local goods, I'm not sure about that, but sure. I mean, India succeed in blue revolution for one major reason: cooperatives. Cooperatives is the backbone of the success of dairy in India, and also of late FPCs called farmer producer companies, basically Section 8 company. Why can't government think on these lines? If they want tourism, sustainable tourism, why should everything go to outside players or big corporate players like whatever resorts or hotels? Why can't the government try? Are there already existing fisher folk cooperatives or corporations? Why can't these people set them up where they can also partake in the whatever revenue that is generated there? At the end of it, it's their right, it's their resources. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that answers your questions, Siddharth. Ashita? Yeah.
Thanks for this very insightful talk, Dr. Sudha and Rohit. And I have 2 questions, one from Rohit, one from Dr. Sudha, and both of them are more kind of clarificatory questions in a certain sense. So from Rohit, I wanted to know, Rohit was pointing out that when we go to the ministers and we say that, okay, this is not, we should not do it like this or that because of the livelihoods which will be lost. And then the ministers turn around and say, don't you want development? So I myself have a very big issue with the way the mainstream understanding of development exists. So is there an answer which is given back to the ministers of making them understand that what really development means? It doesn't mean your roads and infrastructures, and it means way beyond that. So is that task taken up when you're asked that, oh, don't you want development? So is that explained to them that what development really means? So that's my question from Rohit. From Dr. Sudha, my question is about something which you did not really delve much into, but because I do study intergroup behavior, and I'm very much interested in knowing when you say that Adivasis have a conflict with the fisher folk, when fisher folk are trying to claim rights. So, though, despite the fact that both the communities are struggling with the same issues, why is there a conflict which is arising? So, what is the on ground reality? Why are the Adivasis against it? So, if you can just give us more details into it, and as Anjana knows, then I may have more questions. So, thank you.
Yeah. Who wants to go first? So Rohit, you want to go first or Sudama? Rohit, your mouth.
Ma'am, will you go first?
Sure. Uh, The conflict was because they were demanding for the ST status, and the Adivasis didn't want that to be given to the fisher folk. That was the only reason. Whatever their
Sorry for interrupting, just for clarity.
ha.
So does that mean that basically that why they were fearing having more people in the ST status is because they didn't consider them ST, or was it because the population now fighting for ST resources will go up?
That is one reason. That is one primary reason. And the other thing is that whether actually we can categorize the coastal communities as Adivasis is another issue. But I don't think they went into that larger issue, whether you can say that a particular Matsikara community is Adivasis or not, or is a tribe or not. They didn't look at the larger picture. I think it was about sharing of resources.
Okay. Thank you. Because I
Yeah.
also think that is why solidarity is somehow do not end up
But
happening.
that really was the way they resolved that whole issue was something remarkable, because they had to try to see that people really don't precipitate the whole issue. They could have actually. What happens is that we find, I know I'm digressing a little bit, but there have been several conflicts between people who run the mechanized boats and the traditional fisher folk. That is also happening. And here it is between Adivasis versus traditional fisher folk. And there that it is between traditional fisher folk and the mechanized boats operators. It's all about resources and how we are going to share them among ourselves. I think that is where things are going wrong.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Yeah. Rohit?
Hello. Yeah, sorry.
Mm.
So to answer that, one thing is like on a lighter note, we say that yeah, but anyhow, at the end of the day, you need our votes, right? Lighter note that response, but actually there is no answer to that. It's not something which we can say or respond it in the language they understand. It has to be from the people. There's no exact answer to that. How do we respond to that question? Okay.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I understand that limitation. I was just wondering when we go to NGT or we look at the EIA, then can't we have an expanded definition of development? And I was just wondering in those terms so that the court itself can give a expanded definition. I was just looking at it like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Sudaman, do you wanna comment on that? Okay, but I think that's a moot point in what both the speakers have said, that the idea of development, whether it's fraught or whether it has to be pronouncedly defined, and whether this development is sort of symbiotic, whether it leads to symbiotic sustained development is also, I think, a question that I think not researchers, but as civil society, as academia, as people interested in these areas of research should sort of focus. Yeah. So, are there any further questions from the attendees? Yeah, okay. Then I have sort of one question to both the speakers, and it'll be like the last questions. To both Sudha ma'am and Rohith, what like this is in furtherance to what Ashita was asking. When you approach the authorities that are actually supposed to stand in the narrow gap, and not narrow gap, they are the ones that have to sort of guarantee the rights being fulfilled rightly, and the reality is different. What gives you hope, each of you, from your experience, what gives you hope when you work so closely with these communities under such pressure to sort of keep pursuing these issues despite not having the right answer? And I fully well know that when I ask this question, there cannot be a definite answer to it. But what are some of the ways, some of the solidarities, some of the policy initiatives, or how do you work closely with these communities to push their agenda forward? Yeah. And what about hope? Yeah, yeah. To both the speakers. Yeah, Rohit, you would like to go?
Yeah, if you have to say it in one word, it's that democracy. Naturally, how to listen to the people, even if it's for your own benefit or for your own selfish goals. You have to listen to the people. And coming from a particular state like Andhra Pradesh, which in a way it's way better in basic certain democratic practices, protocols. That is one thing. And to put it in a different way, I mean, what else do we have except hope?
Yeah. And like Darvish says, hope is everything. Yeah.
Hope is everything.
Yes, yes, yes. I think that with that, I think Rohit would like you to take it on, Sudha. Yeah.
Since we are talking about coastal communities, I think yeah, what I really, where I draw the hope from is that they're a ferocious lot. Ferocious, wild, ferocious. They really would rip people apart if something. That doesn't mean that they didn't get anything because of that, but that doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge that fact. They're resilient, very tough people. The kind of tough people we come across that in the Old Man in the Sea. Yeah, whenever we look at these people, we remember that they are going and fight, going and trying to live in the mighty sea. That kind of a toughness you come across, and I think that is very, very reassuring when it comes to the coastal community. Obviously, that brings in hope, the resilience.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I think the last hope the last words I think will be ferocious hope as we end this talk. I know there's so much to research and so much to work on the ground on these areas, and to engage with these communities. And on behalf of Nazaria and the Climate and Sustainability Constellation at Jindal Global University, I want to thank both our speakers once again, and all of you for joining us this afternoon. I know joining a Zoom meeting on a Saturday afternoon evening is not easy, but thanks for showing up. And conversations like these remind us why solidarity from the river to the sea and from the coast to the court is essential if we are to imagine just and sustainable futures. Thank you so much.